The organizing committee of PERSPECTIVA 2021 presents this event as the first forum of its kind completely in Spanish in collaboration with other members of the community who come from underrepresented groups that have identities of intersection and that typically do not have representation in these kind of spaces. PERSPECTIVA is an impartial, nonpartisan organization, and the forum is impartially facilitated by me. And I live and work in Longmont, and I'm not registered to vote in the city of Boulder, nor in Boulder County. The forum has been organized with the intention of being as inclusive as possible, to include people who have the privilege and the duty to vote, as well as those who cannot exercise this privilege, but who do have an interest in how the government is run locally, since the actions of the local government affect all of us equally. This forum will be in Spanish, as I already explained at the beginning, with professional English and American Sign Language interpretation. We ask that each person please select the audio channel of the language in which they best express themselves. We would like the communication to be clear and precise, and that's why we hired professional interpreters who we thank for their professional service, and we ask the candidates to not use this space, please, to practice or use your Spanish. We would encourage you to practice Spanish or American Sign Language extensively during your campaign and in all the other public spaces. But in this space, we want everyone present to use the language that they best use and select the appropriate audio channel. And for the benefit of all present, please allow the experts in interpreting to do their work. Also, we would ask you that when you speak, speak a little bit more slowly so that you can allow the interpreters to complete what you have said, and we would be very grateful for that. And with that, I'll open the space with a land acknowledgement first. We honor and recognize that we're in the ancestral homeland of the Cheyenne and Arapaho nations. This area also has a long history of exchange, hunting, gathering, healing, and spirituality. For many other nations, such as the Lakota, Ute, Comanche, Shoshone, Apache, among others. We recognize the indigenous nations as the first stewards of this land, the water, the plants, and the animals who identify this area as their home. As we pronounce and make this recognition, and these words are heard, the connection of these nations with their traditional and ancestral territories is renewed and reaffirmed. We also recognize the cruel and painful history of genocide and forced displacement that these nations lived in their own territories. We respect the diversity of people who still feel and live this connection to this land in which we are present today. And we honor and we thank these nations and the ancestors of this territory as we gather here. Finally, we also would like to acknowledge the forced displacement that took place in the past in order to house what we know today as the city of Boulder. As we prepare for the elections of new Boulder City Council members, we would like to open a space for our entire community, including local Latinos and members of other underrepresented groups, in order to meet the individuals who are running as candidates for City Council, to be able to ask them questions on issues of common interest, focus on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion as the main axis that affects us as members of the Boulder community. The government of the city of Boulder has declared the equity plan as one of its priorities. In the chat, we will include the link to this plan in case you would like to read it. You can read it there. The equity plan for the city of Boulder. All of the questions that will be asked were proposed by leaders who self-identify as members of communities that are not generally represented, such as the Latino community, community members living on the streets, Afro-descendant communities, people with disabilities, community with refugee immigration status, refugees or immigrants, the LGBTQ community, students, and other interested individuals. The PERSPECTIVA Organizing Committee took on the task of soliciting questions from the community to learn about the issues of common interest. These questions have come to us before the meeting, and we have consolidated them today in an organized way for the candidates who are accompanying us so that they might answer them. It's important to mention that the Planning Committee received a large number of very important questions. We are very grateful to the community for sending us so many questions, and we did the best effort possible to synthesize them and to include all of the relevant issues. We hope that all communities feel represented today. I will present the questions chosen by the PERSPECTIVA Organizing Committee to all of the candidates. We will write them in the chat, and each candidate will receive the same amount of time to answer each question and thus share their proposed solution to the concerns that the community is expressing. So with this description of how the forum will be facilitated, let's begin. Welcome to everyone. To start, we're going to ask each candidate to please take 1 minute to introduce yourself, starting with your name, your pronouns, where you were born, and how long you've been living in Boulder. Please, in 1 minute. And if we could start with Nicole, please.
Thank you so much for having us here this evening and for gathering everyone together. I'm just so full of joy to be in this company. So thank you. My name is Nicole Speer. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I will also go by they and them. I was born in a suburb, in Portland, Oregon, and grew up in a suburb of Portland, Oregon for the majority of my life. I lived in the Los Angeles area for 4 years, in St. Louis for 6 years. Then I arrived in Boulder in 2005, and I've lived here for the last 16 years. Did I cover everything?
Muy bien, gracias.
Very good. Thank you so much, Nicole. Now we'll give the floor to Michael so that he might introduce himself.
Laura, I apologize, but I don't know how to access the English transcription.
The instructions are in the chat.
Michael, you go down to translation, the globe at the bottom,
Okay.
and select EN.
While Michael is preparing by choosing his language, let's pass the floor to Mark. Please, Mark, if you're ready, please introduce yourself with your name, pronouns, and quickly how long you have been living in Boulder.
Thank you, Laura. My name is Mark Wallach. I go by the pronouns of he and him. I've been living in Boulder for 7 years. For the past 2 years, I've been a member of the Boulder City Council, and I'm running for re-election this year. Prior to my living in Boulder, I lived in New York City for about 39 years, in Manhattan and Brooklyn. I was a lawyer. I was a real estate developer. I was a political speechwriter for a while, and I came to Boulder in 2014. I have enjoyed it ever since, and except perhaps the part about being on city council, which is quite strenuous. But that is the sum of my background. Thank you.
Gracias por presentarse.
Thank you for introducing yourself. Now we'll pass the floor to Lauren.
Thank you, Laura. My name's Lauren, and I use the pronouns she and her. I was born outside of Seattle in unincorporated Snohomish County in Washington. And I have, let's see, after that, I went to school at the University of Oregon in Eugene, and then lived in the mountains in Summit County for a little bit before moving to Boulder 10 years ago. Thank you.
Y gracias a ti.
Thank you. Now we'll pass the floor to Michael, if you're ready.
I think I can wing this. I still don't see the globe. So I must be hitting the wrong button. But my name is Michael Christy. I go by the pronouns he and him. I was born in Los Angeles, California, basically raised in Southern California, Los Angeles, and San Diego. I graduated college from UCLA. I went to law school at the University of San Diego. I joined the Air Force after law school and then lived in the Bay Area for about 12 years and moved to Boulder about 4 years ago.
Muy bien, gracias por compartir.
Well, thank you for sharing. All of those who are in the English channel were able to hear Michael's words. If you'd like to give me a signal with your fingers, with your thumb. Okay, things like everything's okay there. Finally, I'd like to give the floor to David, who had the kindness to come here, but he's going to have to leave for another important event. David, if you'd like to take the time to introduce yourself, and you
Yes.
can give your final message as well.
Good evening. This is David Takahashi. My pronouns are preferred to be we, us, and ours. And I have been in Boulder for over 30 years. I raised two lovely daughters here, born and raised. And tonight happens to be my wedding anniversary. I had hoped very much that the schedule would allow me to do both things, but it turns out that that is not going to be possible. I would like to say that as a council member, I would be holding space for all of you, trying to open that door, and that I am happy that this is being recorded so that I can review what is of importance to all of you. And with that, I'm going to say good night.
Gracias por compartir.
Thank you for sharing with us, David, and good luck with your family event. Now, we're going to go to the questions, where each candidate will have the same question. They'll have the same amount of time. You have 2 minutes to answer each question. And I will let you know when your time has run out. I'll ask you beforehand for forgiveness that I'm going to have to interrupt you if you go past 2 minutes in order to be able to give the same time to all of the other candidates. So if we're ready, we'll start the section of questions that the community has chosen to share today. The first question is, if you were elected, how would you use your position on City Council to increase, retain, and enhance the assets of having a diverse population living in Boulder, indicating the value of having a diverse population in Boulder? And what would be the mechanisms that the city could use in order to measure this advance? Please be specific. We'll give the floor to Nicole first.
Lo compartiremos en el
And
chat.
we'll share this question in the chat if you'd like to go back and look over the question.
Thank you. I admit I always feel a little bit uncomfortable getting this question as a white homeowner here in Boulder. And the way that I would approach this on council is really to listen to the people in the communities that are affected and that are feeling excluded and left out, and then act and really do the things that we are being asked to do to create an inclusive community. Some of the things that I've heard in the course of this campaign have been things like making sure to translate documents, websites, and things like that. Making sure that we are valuing the work that people from communities often left out are doing, not just by giving credit and frankly, sometimes taking credit for that work, but also by paying people, giving them, showing that we are invested in the value of the work that they're doing. And so for me, that comes down to paying people for the work that they're doing for boards and commissions, paying people for city council, but really just strengthening the relationships between anyone who is on council with people in the community whose voices typically go unheard, and really making sure that that we're not just talking, because that's what I hear the most, is that all we do is talk and we aren't actually doing the work of inclusion. And for me, that's committing to do what we are being asked to do.
Gracias por su
Thank you for your answer. Now we'll give the floor to Michael to answer the same question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm still having a little bit of difficulty, but I understand the question. So, you know, I agree with Nicole. I think part of the way that we move towards increasing and enhancing a diverse population is through community engagement. I know that Boulder has the Boulder Connectors program. I would encourage the expansion of that program. I do believe that there is a significant loss when you look at the makeup of the people sitting on city council. In my opinion, we do not have a diverse enough council. So I feel what is lost is that there are people who are in underrepresented communities who really don't have a voice at the table. So I believe we need to be working harder to make sure that we are creating a welcoming, inclusive, and diverse community. Again, one way that I see us achieving that goal is through a Boulder Connectors type program, where we have it almost like a liaison of someone who works for the city, but actually goes into these underrepresented communities, establishes relationships, builds a level of trust, and helps then bridge that gap that I feel is so significantly missing from our community, and particularly on council.
Gracias por su respuesta.
Thank you for your answer, Michael. Now we'll give the floor to Mark to hear your answer.
Well, coming from New York, I do have some experience with a more diverse community, and that's something I would love to see replicated in Boulder. We certainly do lack diversity in under any measure. There are a number of things I would propose to do, some small, some large. Obviously, creating affordable housing is an important component of creating a more diverse community and a more inclusive community, and that's always been an emphasis of mine. I served for a year on the board of Boulder Housing Partners, and affordable housing remains an emphasis for me. Small things. We have partial translator services at council meetings. I'd like to see that extended for a full meeting, so that people don't just participate and listen to a portion of the meeting, they can listen to the full meeting. We do provide diversity training for staff. It's something I think we might even look towards increasing. I agree with Michael on the issue of community engagement. And the last thing I would propose is, frankly, a higher pay for council members, so that other members of the community who otherwise could not afford to do this job can run for office and be a participant on the council. You know, at the moment, $12,000 a year is something that some of us have the luxury of accepting, but other members of the community simply cannot. And if we want more inclusion and diversity, we need to be able to pay members of council, in effect, a living wage, because what we're doing now does not support any measure of diversity on the council. So those are my suggestions, and thank you.
Gracias por su respuesta.
Thank you for your answer. Now we'll pass the floor to Lauren so that she can answer the same question.
Thank you. I think that a number of great points have been brought up. I really appreciate Nicole and sort of her ideas about making sure that we're listening to the communities that we're trying to help encourage and help grow. I think that not only reaching out, but acting on what we hear, adding more translation beyond what we already do to city council meetings, and, you know, council pay is an important part of trying to address the representational issues on council. But beyond that, we have a lot of people working in our community, people of color doing really amazing work. And I think that, you know, the council needs to also reach out to them more. We should, prior to COVID, there was city council members meeting meeting people where they're at, going to sort of church groups and things like that. I would like to see that program started up again so that we're really making sure that we're trying to connect with people in the community in a way that is most comfortable so that we can get really, so we can have open dialogue and get the most robust feedback possible.
Gracias a todos por sus
Thanks
respuestas.
to all for your answers to the first question. Now we'll go to the second one. What is your opinion about the participation of communities of people, Black, Indigenous people, and other people of color, the LGBTQ people, with people who are living in the streets? What would change so that the results would be more equitable for their participation? We'll start to give the time to, we'll start with Mark first.
Can you repeat that question, Laura?
Claro que sí, Mark. La pregunta
Of course, the question is in the chat so that you can read it.
I'm really not sure how to answer that, to be very frank with you. Obviously, it's not enough to simply say we need more community engagement. It's how we get there. I think we are attempting, to the best of our understanding, to be more responsive to underrepresented communities. We do have, you know, at the city government level, we use an equity lens for all programs and actions. And hopefully over time that will serve to correct deficiencies in representation. And until we see that program in action a little more, it's hard to say exactly how we should change it and make it better. It's a relatively new phenomenon. I'd like to see it in operation for a couple of years, and then we can determine where we need to augment our efforts or change our direction, where we're falling short, and where we can do better. So I would like to at least monitor the progress of our equity lens and the representations that we obtain through its operation. You know, it's a little hard to comment at the moment. The process is still a bit new.
Gracias por su respuesta.
Thank you for your answer, Mark. Now we'll give the floor to Lauren so that she can answer the same question.
Thank you. I think it is difficult to make sure that we are reaching out to all of these communities. I mean, part of the issue is that some people in these communities are hard for us to connect with. And I think that there's a variety of things we can do to address this. Be Heard Boulder, our virtual platform, makes some of this, I think that it's helping a lot in our community right now, but there's still more we can be doing. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, I think we really need to focus on meeting people where they're at, whether that's having surveyors go out into the community to ask important questions for big issues that are coming up, or, you know, other things in terms of making sure that the meetings that we have are accessible to people, regardless of, you know, their physical abilities. I think that, you know, there's everything from interpretation to making sure the graphics that we use are very visible and easily read. We just always need to be making sure that we're looking at things for people that come from a variety of backgrounds with a variety of skills, because that makes it more inclusive to everyone, you know, regardless of whether or not you are in a protected class. You know, as an architect, I believe that we need to design buildings to be more accessible because it makes it easier for everyone. And so it's about sort of that shared value, and bringing, by addressing specific communities, we can go beyond those communities in creating more equal access.
Gracias por su respuesta.
Thank
Laura.
you for your answer, Laura. Now we'll give the space to Nicole, please.
Thank you. For me, this really comes down to thinking about the way that we are currently engaging communities. One of the things that I have noticed in this campaign process is that the majority of the people that we are talking to in forums outside of this one, in other spaces, are really the people whose voices are always heard. And I think one of the things that we can do is really to make sure that we are listening to a diversity of voices. And many of the board appointments and things like that often feel like they come from a who you know perspective, that we're really connecting to the people on council are connecting to the people they already know, bringing them onto boards. And I think one of the things we can do about this is to really prioritize lived experience, and realize that there is more to appointing people to these positions of power than simply the field that they work in, or where they got their degree, or who they know. It's really about looking for people from LGBTQ communities, and not just putting them on one board, but putting them on all boards. Thinking about going out and connecting with people in the disabled community and bringing them into all the boards, right? It's not just that these things touch on one area of our city. This really needs to be throughout. And for me, some of this comes to getting people on council who have the connections to some of these communities, that people can be brought in other ways that are currently done now. Going in with a very narrow perspective onto council, it's really hard to know who are the people, who are the BIPOC leaders in the community that we can reach out to and connect to, and find people who are willing to be on the boards. But a lot of it comes down to us as white people, white privileged people, educating ourselves about the ways that we are biased and what we're holding in ourselves, so that we, as we're working on council, as we're working in boards and commissions and city staff, we're really creating a space that's comfortable for people as well, where we're not inadvertently making people feel excluded.
Gracias por esa respuesta, Nicole.
Thank you for that answer, Nicole. We're going to have to go after now with the next candidate. We want to listen to the answer by Michael to the same question.
Thank you. So Laura, the premise of your question is asking, what are your thoughts on community engagement from these underrepresented communities? So to me, what this is asking is, it's identifying a problem that the people in these underrepresented communities do not feel included and do not feel welcome. So it's not so much is the city, the way the question is phrased, it's not so much as the city making the appropriate efforts to reach out to these communities, it's why are these communities not reaching out or being involved in the process? So to me, in response to this question, it's again, it sort of falls back on how do we make these underrepresented communities feel more included, feel more welcomed? You know, this is, to me, again, this falls down to community engagement, trying to establish relationships with people in these communities to make them feel like they have a voice in this city and that their voice matters. You know, some of the specific ideas that I had is, you know, within our own city departments, I believe that if we can develop some type of like diversity mission statement with very specific and attainable goals, analyze the historical practices and achievements that these departments have done in the past, and then identify what current needs do we have or do these departments have to succeed in reaching our diversity goals, working towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that would be, you know, having specific policies in place for hiring, training, retention of workers, work assignments, so that there's an equitable distribution of, you know, the tougher assignments and the easier assignments, that we're looking at the promotion rates of people in these communities, that we are providing leadership opportunities for people in these communities. I think if we can work towards establishing or achieving those goals, it is going to allow people in those communities feel like they are included and they are welcomed and that their voice does matter. But those are the thoughts that I have in response to your question.
Gracias por esa respuesta, Michael. Ahora
Thank you
pasamos
for that
a la siguiente
answer, Michael. We're going to pass now to the next question, which is as follows. If the Congress of the United States would propose a pathway to citizenship, how would you help to take advantage of the resources that the city has for migrant people in Boulder to have affordable housing and to cover the high rates for legal applicants? And we will start listening to the responses. First, Michael.
Yeah, so I think that probably the crux of the problem is bureaucracy. So if there is a more efficient and direct method to allow individuals to have that path to residency, we should be untangling all of that red tape. There's no reason to have bottlenecking when it comes to someone's livelihood like that. And if that then allows somebody to have access to affordable housing, then that's what we need to be doing. Like we see in our community already, I think that the Hispanic population in Boulder is about 17% or 14% of our population. The Black community represents about 1.5%. The Asian community is about 0.5%. That's added together, that's a significant portion of our population. And those people in those communities, they need to have affordable places to live just like the rest of us do. And having a streamlined process to allow those individuals to gain residency as quickly and efficiently as they can, to allow them to have access to those housing opportunities, we need to be doing all we can at the city level to ensure that that process is as efficient as it can be.
Gracias por su respuesta, Michael. Ahora pasamos.
Thank you for your answer, Michael. We're going to give the word now to Mark for his answer.
First of all, I'm very hopeful that Congress will at some point approve a pathway towards citizenship for undocumented immigrants. If that were to occur, we currently provide legal services on behalf of individuals who are facing eviction. And I don't see why we could not provide similar services to support those who are looking to enter into affordable housing in our community. Of course, the first issue is we have to build more affordable housing. But assuming we can do that, and assuming we can and assuming there is a pathway forward towards citizenship, we should do everything in our power to bring those individuals into our community on a fully legal basis and to get them into the affordable housing that we can provide. So that's not, to me, it's a rather simple thing. We have some resources. We ought to use those resources for that purpose.
Gracias por su respuesta, Mark. Ahora pasaremos el micrófono.
Thank you for your answer, Mark. Now we're going to give the word to Nicole to listen to her answer.
Thank you. So I was just talking with somebody the other day who is a single mother and was talking about how challenging the affordable housing process is from the paperwork perspective, from the appointments and meetings and everything. Just being a working single parent, it was really challenging to get in there. I think this is a case where one of the main principles that I operate by is when we are addressing the needs of some of the most vulnerable people in the community, everybody benefits. And I think that having some sort of, as some of the others have mentioned, having a navigator, somebody who can help with this process, investing city resources in staff people to walk people through this process, make it easier for accessing affordable housing, as well as any of the proceedings and paperwork and things like that that would be required in moving towards citizenship. I absolutely feel, I mean, this is an incredibly important area for our city. I think we are a city that values immigrants, and we would like I would like to see us invest in somebody who could do that, as well as covering some of the fees to allow people to have a pathway to citizenship here.
Thank you for your answer, Nicole. Now we're going to give the word to Lauren to listen to her answer to the same question. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you. Yeah, I strongly agree with what Nicole just said. I would advocate for a navigator or facilitator to help ensure that we can make this process as smooth as possible for people in our community. I mean, one of the things that the reason that I really hope we can do this is because without sort of legal status, we have people living in our community who aren't allowed to fully participate. And I think that that is not only a loss for them, but it's a huge loss for our community. And so I think that it would be really important to help facilitate that, you know, anything we can, and also because their full participation, I believe, would bring a lot of value to our community.
Thank you all for your answers. Now we're going to take on the next question, which is, what is your understanding of the needs, challenges, protections, and initiatives that people in pre-manufactured homes face? Would you vote in favor of the annexation on the manufactured homes park of San Lázaro in the city of Boulder? And we will start to listen to the answer of Lauren first. Please.
Thank you. So right now, across the state, we're seeing issues where mobile home owners are increasing rates on people who live within manufactured home parks at really high rates. So this is causing a lot of housing instability and a lot of you know, questions about how viable this housing stays for people within our community. I would really like to reach out to the community at San Lázaro to figure out what they see as the opportunities or risks of annexation into the city. My general feeling is that it would probably be beneficial to annex into the city. And so I would like to help facilitate that, but I want to make sure that I'm doing something that would be appreciated by the community before moving forward.
Gracias por esa respuesta. Seguimos escuchando
Thank you
ahora.
for that answer. Now we will listen to Mark, please.
The short answer is yes. I am very much in favor of the annexation of San Lazaro. I've actually had some meetings and conversations about the subject. And like every annexation, it's a question of getting the proper terms and conditions under which we can do that. But I'm hopeful that we will move forward on that. The conditions, the legal conditions of manufactured home residents are of great concern to me and always have been. I was responsible for changing our statutes to make it clear that mobile home residents are able to access our rental protection programs, including legal assistance in the case of an eviction. I am very concerned about their stature in this community. We have zoned all mobile home communities so that they can't be converted into condos, but I am very concerned about people coming in and buying those parks and throwing out lower income residents and trying to gentrify them. So that's an issue that's on my mind constantly. I also would like to obtain rental protection for them in terms of a limited exemption to the prohibition on rent control. I think pad rents should be controlled because the costs of moving a manufactured home are so great that it almost becomes impossible. So you end up having to sell your home. So I would like to control pad rents in a way that the current statutes don't permit, but I would like to see those statutes changed. And I've argued that case to the majority leader, Steve Fenberg, and hope that he will take it up.
Gracias por su respuesta. Pasamos el micrófono.
Thank you
ahora.
for your answer. Now we're going to give Nicole the word for her answer.
Thank you. I will just acknowledge my understanding is not what I would like it to be. This is an area where I need to do a little bit more research. You know, my godmother was living in Southwest Colorado in a mobile home community where they had purchased the home. They had an accident, needed to move into an assisted care facility, and they unfortunately lost tens of thousands of dollars because they were not allowed to sell their home on the lot. They basically said, you know, you need to have somebody take this home away because it was too old for what the park was wanting to have there, what the owner was. So they lost most of their savings in that. And so, you know, I see this as a very important issue and one that I really want to understand better. And as far as voting in favor of the annexation, I would absolutely, if that is what the park residents are looking for, I would support them as the people who live there and know what their needs are.
Gracias por esa respuesta. Ahora pasamos.
Thank you for your answer. Now we're going to give the mic to Michael to listen to his.
Thank you, Laura. You know, I see that the biggest challenges and needs of those living in the manufactured home parks are probably rent control issues. And while I completely agree with Mark that there should be some level of rent control on pad rents, I don't necessarily believe that should be applied to the manufactured home itself. It's also my understanding that most people living in manufactured homes actually own that unit. So it really becomes a matter of the rent that is being charged for the pad that the home is placed. And I do believe that there should be some level of rent control on the pads. Mark had mentioned the legal assistance for eviction, the no eviction without representation. Through my work at the Community Mediation and Resolution Center, I'm responsible for mediating landlord-tenant issues. And so I have found that system, having a lawyer represent someone who is on the verge of being evicted, has been very beneficial, not only for the landlords, but for the tenants themselves, because it brings the parties together to work collaboratively to try to figure out some resolution, which usually results in the landlord getting paid what they are owed. It may be a deferred payment, for some period of time, but it also more importantly allows that tenant to have stable housing and not have to worry about uprooting his or her family and being displaced. With respect to the annexation of the San Lazaro manufactured home,
Parece que hubo una desconexión y perdimos la presencia de Michael.
Seems like there was a lack of connection with Michael. Maybe he'll be able to come back. It may be an internet issue or a technical issue, but I believe we listened to most of his answer. We hope that he comes back for the coming questions. I'm going to go on the next question, and hopefully we'll hear from Michael again. Next question is, what are your attributes, experience that will be useful whenever there is a sexist, racist, homophobic, or a prejudice or bias comment? We will start listening to Nicole's answer, and you can see the questions in the chat.
Thank you. I was just talking with a friend about a similar issue today. And one of the things that I have really been working on over the last few years is my courage in speaking up in the moment when I observe something that happens that is sexist or racist or homophobic or otherwise derogatory or some sort of microaggression. But the other part of that is really being able to recognize when those things are happening, which I do not believe that, I am a part of the LGBTQ community. I have an invisible disability, and there are still things that I am working on every day that I constantly miss. And so part of it is just learning and understanding the different perspectives that you need in order to notice when these things are happening so that you can then address them in the moment. And so I think that this is work that I've been doing for a few years. I feel like I am getting better at it. It is a constant battle to overcome the biases and things that I have, but I am constantly working on this. So courage and perspective, just being able to notice.
Gracias por su respuesta, Nicole. Ahora pasamos la palabra.
Thank you for your answer, Nicole. Now we're going to give the word to Mark to listen to his answer.
Well, my answer is going to be fairly brief. I am a reasonably strong individual, and I have no problem calling out unacceptable behavior when I see it, whether it's on council, whether it's off council. Those kinds of comments are intolerable to me. They are hateful, and I simply do not have any reluctance to confront anyone who's doing that and telling them that it's inappropriate and it's got to stop. I'm not shy about that. And I would not be shy about it going forward. It's, that's the kind of speech that we cannot have. It's hateful. It's disgusting to me. And if I hear it, I will respond to it. I always have. Thank you.
Gracias por su respuesta, Mark.
Thank you for your answer, Mark. Welcome back, Michael. I'm happy that you were able to connect again.
Yeah, sorry about that. Tonight is not my technology is not working in my favor tonight. So, with respect to the question.
Perdona, Michael. Disculpa la interrupción.
Sorry, Michael. sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to give the word to Lauren to answer the question, and that may give you more time to prepare your answer.
Thank you. I think it's easy to do the right thing in the face of really aggressive instances of sexism, racism, and homophobia. But one of the things that I noticed more and more, actually particularly on the campaign trail, is the number of small slights that go unaddressed. I give a personal story. I had someone come up and touch my hair on stage in front of a number of people. And those quick things are hard to address in the moment. It takes a quick reaction, and it's easy to write off and not call someone out. And so I think what Nicole said is really important. We need to be looking at, in ourselves to kind of understand these more subtle forms of things that are happening in our community, and make sure that we are doing what we can to call people out and address these actions as they happen, because they can be so fast, but the impacts can be, significant.
Muy bien, gracias por esa respuesta, Lauren.
Thank you for your answer, Lauren. Now we want to listen to Michael. And first I want to make sure that you have been able to pick on the interpretation channel again on the bottom of your screen, this globe icon, just to make sure that you're on the English channel. Thank you, Michael. I am glad that you came back and you can answer to this question. It is on the chat if you want to read it.
Yeah, and thank you again, Lauren. Thanks for understanding about the technology issues I'm having. So part of my job as a lawyer is I do a lot of pro bono cases, and I have done a number of pro bono cases for indigent clients for domestic violence. And I unfortunately have witnessed firsthand inside the courtroom where you think, biases and racial slurs and comments and derogatory comments and sexist comments are put at bay. And I unfortunately have witnessed firsthand that that's not always the case. Where I have been in front of a judge where I knew that this one particular judge that I was arguing in front of didn't necessarily believe in domestic violence, as ridiculous as that may sound. And so I knew that I had an uphill battle going into the courtroom. And my client was the victim of pretty significant and severe domestic violence. And at the end of the trial, the judge made, well, I would say throughout the trial, first of all, the judge had made sort of slight comments to indicate to me that the judge did not believe what my client was telling the court. And that was also made patently clear at the end when the judge issued his ruling. So subsequently, it was a conversation with that judge, with the presiding judge of the courthouse to let them know that, hey, this is not appropriate conduct, particularly for someone in a public position like that. There's no excuse for it anywhere. But when you have someone who is the victim of domestic violence, who has suffered that level of trauma, and you're sitting inside a courtroom and now they're telling their story to someone who basically is letting them know that they don't believe them, it's even more traumatizing. So I did all that I felt I could at the end of that trial to discuss that issue with the judge and with the presiding judge to make sure that that kind of conduct was absolutely not acceptable.
Gracias por su respuesta. Ahora pasaremos.
Thank you for your answer. Now we're going to go on the next question. The next question is, how are your decisions going to impact the way that the budget is distributed in the hand of the frame of equity? The same question is in the chat. You could reread it again. We're going to pass on the word to Mark to start with the answers to this question.
Well, the budget is basically drafted by staff, and staff uses an equity lens for every decision that they make. So they are extremely cognizant of that. And when we review the budget, we are looking for the same characteristics that they are. We try for equity in all of our decisions. We try for equity in all of our procurement policies. We try for equity in our hiring policies. So and we have not achieved anything close to perfection, but it is simply a major focus of how we govern in Boulder. And I can tell you as a member of council, it is something we are always thinking about. Whenever we look at a particular action or an ordinance that we want to enact, we look to see if it is equitable and discriminatory in any way at all. So that is a major concern of this council. It's a major concern of the staff, and we are always looking at equity in our decision-making processes.
Gracias por esa respuesta. Pasamos la palabra a
Thank you for that answer. Now we're going to give the word to Lauren so she can answer the same question.
Thank you. For me, I think that I would like to see a slight overhaul of the budget process in general. I think that while staff does take into account what gets discussed in the work plan and things like that, I think that we need to have council have a closer eye on the budget earlier in the process. Right now, council doesn't really see the budget until the last 3 months sort of the year. And I think that as a council, part of your role is setting priorities around spending. And so I think that that should be a more explicit discussion that happens earlier in the year. In terms of the racial equity plan and how we use that in our budget process, during COVID, we looked, city staff said that they used the racial equity plan or racial equity lens while looking at what to cut and how the budget would be allocated, and said that they made changes, but there isn't a clear record of what it looked like before and what changes were made. And I think that if we want to be accountable to that plan, we need to be more explicit in recording what actions we're taking exactly.
Gracias por esa respuesta. Ahora pasamos.
Thank you for that answer. Now we're going to have Michael on the mic so we can listen to his answer.
Thank you, Laura. Laura, if I could just go back, I just wanted to make sure I concluded my comment on the San Lazaro manufacturing park. I would support the annexation of that manufactured park. The devil's in the details with respect to an annexation agreement. I would look at that agreement through a lawyer's lens and make sure that the terms were fair and reasonable to both sides, but I do support the annexation. With respect to this question, I think it's easy for everybody who's not actually on council to be critical of the budget process, how budget funds are allocated. My hope is that if I get elected, to be appointed to the budget committee, so I have a much more in-depth working knowledge of how the budget works, where the monies are coming from, how the monies are going out. And all of that would be looked at through the lens, through the racial equity plan, to make sure that we are doing all we can to make sure that the distribution of monies throughout our city is done in an equitable manner.
Disculpen, creo que hubo un problema técnico.
Sorry, I think there was a little technical problem with the channel in which Michael was speaking. I don't know if we could repeat it or fix it at this moment.
Do you want to tell me where you were cut off, or should I just start from the beginning?
Michael, si gustas.
Michael, if you would like to simply say the last part.
Sure. I think I said that, with respect to the allocation of monies that come in and go out, If I were on the budget committee, which would be my hope if I get elected to council, so I have a much in-depth, in a deeper knowledge of the workings of the budget, my hope would be to look at those allocation of funds through the lens of the racial equity plan to make sure that those funds are distributed across the city in an equitable way and capture the needs of those most in need in our underrepresented communities.
Gracias por esa respuesta.
Thank you for that quick answer. Now we'll give time to Nicole to hear your complete answer.
Thank you. I think this is a really great question. And when I am working on budgets in my current position or, with an organization or something, the way that I generally like to look at it is in terms of what are our priorities and how we allocate those funds can help us think about how we can reach those priorities. So I think, in thinking about this, what I would be really interested in is hearing from some of the city staff who truly are exceptional in many of our departments, that I think that they have a lot of ideas already on what the work is that they could be doing in order to advance equity within their specific part of the city. I think that is likely true of our boards and commissions as well. And so for me, what I would like to hear is what are the ways that these different groups would like to see equity advanced? What is the kind of on the ground view that they have of things that we could do that would really make a difference in advancing us forward? And then as we are working on the budgets for those departments, thinking about how we can make sure that if we are able to, as I hope we would, decide that equity truly is a priority for us, think about how we're allocating funds to those different departments to enable them to do the work of making those aspects of the city more equitable.
Gracias a todos.
Thanks to all of you for your answer. Now we'll go to the next question. According to your experience, what are the circumstances that most have worsened and continue to affect communities, low-income communities, individuals, older people, and people with disabilities during the pandemic? And if you won the elections, how would you affect the situation in a positive way for those people? We'll start by hearing Lauren's answer first, please.
Sorry, I was just waiting a sec to see it come up in the chat so I can make sure I fully understand the question.
Si lo pueden leer en el chat.
Couldn't you read it in the chat?
I see it in Spanish, and then I think in just a sec I will see it in English.
Muy bien.
Thank you.
Okay.
So in terms of the situations that have gotten worse through the pandemic, I think there's so much variety to that. We all have been affected in different ways. I personally see a lot of families with children really struggling through not having the childcare that they need. And that has been very difficult to allow people to work predictable hours and then having support with their workplaces to address those concerns, I think is really critical. As a council member, I think, beyond the pandemic, childcare is just such an important issue in terms of making sure that people in our community can be involved both in work and other activities. I think that the city should do more to kind of ensure that we have affordable childcare services for people. You know, several years ago during a council election, it was suggested that we should have childcare for city council meetings, which I thought was a really great proposal. I would love, I mean, it's just so important for people to have the option to participate fully in the community. And I think that's one way we can help facilitate that.
Gracias por esa respuesta.
Thank you
Ahora
for that answer. And now we'll give the time to Michael, please, to answer the same question that's in the chat.
Yeah, Laura, I think that which circumstances have gotten worse, I would say the wealth disparity, and not just in Boulder, but across our country. You know, you've seen a number of people as a result of the pandemic losing their jobs, which in turn creates a lot of housing insecurity, which is a tremendous amount of stress on a family or even an individual. And it's, you know, that it's situations like that we should be able as a society as a whole to be able to lift those people up who are in that situation and help them more than what we are doing currently. It's, you know, someone as a result of the pandemic should not lose their home. There were measures that were put in place to help alleviate those strains, but it's not just the physical stress of going through that type of situation. It's also the emotional trauma that someone will suffer as a result of that. For example, I have a good friend of mine here in Boulder is a blind man, and he said that during the pandemic, what has happened is he will go out and he will walk with his guide dog, but that the city trees have not been properly trimmed. And so as he's walking, his dog's at a lower height level than he is, obviously, but his dog will guide him past a tree. And if there's a branch hanging over the tree, the branch will poke my friend in the face and sometimes in the eye. And so when he then goes to the city to try to complain about that, because of the pandemic with people being out of work, he can't get a hold of anybody, and he's blind, so he can't go out and cut the tree himself. So it's a combination of a whole host of stressors for everyone that has suffered from the pandemic. If I were elected, how would I have a positive impact on their situation? Again, I think that a lot of this falls back to community engagement and letting people know that the city is here to help them. But it's not just a matter of saying those words. Like, we have to have boots on the ground. I mentioned earlier that the Boulder Connector program. We have to have people going into these communities, establishing relationships so that people feel like they can depend on their city government, not just the city government is sitting up on this dais, you know, spewing words of social justice and racial equity and inclusion. We need to see action put in place. And so I do believe that through robust community engagement programs, through something like the Boulder Connectors program, we can allow people.
I'm sorry for the interruption.
Sure.
I want to pass time to Nicole to be able to hear her answer also.
Thank you. I think some folks have already touched on some of the things that we're seeing more of. Housing insecurity, absolutely. It is a big one that, you know, I think has gotten worse over the course of the pandemic, particularly with people losing jobs. I think, Lauren, you hit the nail on the head with childcare being a big one. You know, even for somebody who had a work from home job, that was a real challenge during, especially last year. I think mental health, as Michael, I believe it was you that mentioned mental health. This is another big area that really has just gotten worse over the course of the pandemic, when we've all been exposed to so much stress, and folks who were already exposed to a lot of stress really are bearing the brunt of that additional stress and trauma. What I would do being elected to city council, this is not a situation that can wait 5 to 10 years for a solution. There are already groups in our community who are doing some of this work around affordable housing, around providing housing vouchers, around providing mental health services, childcare, rental assistance, all these things. And I think looking into ways that we can quickly amplify their efforts, often just by providing more resources to them. That would be a relatively quick way to address some of these issues.
Gracias por esa.
Thank you for your answer. Now we'll give the space to Mark to hear your answer to the same question.
Thank you. We've touched on a number of these items: the wealth disparity, job loss, housing insecurity. An additional factor that we haven't discussed is that many lower income workers have been forced to work under very dangerous conditions when many executives could simply work remotely and under hybrid circumstances, and they don't have to go into the office and they don't have to connect with other people. The childcare issue, I think, is an important one. And there's something else. We have a digital divide in this city in which lower income people are not able to access the same kinds of internet services, or they don't have the computers necessary to access good education during COVID. And that's something we're going to need to address, and we need to continue to build out what we call our digital backbone, which will provide services to all communities. And lastly, I think many of these communities have also suffered from an increased level of loneliness and loss of connection that many others did not, simply because they have not had the same resources and access to a company that other people did. And I think we're going to need to address that. I think Nicole, I think, mentioned it in terms of the mental aspects and the mental issues that arise from COVID. And we're going to have to be able to provide resources to address that as well. There are a whole set of things that we need to be concerned with on this issue. And it's going to take a while for us to get back to normal.
Gracias a todos.
Thank you to all for your answers. Now we'll go to the next question. If you would like to be a member, if you were a member of the City Council, how would you promote changes so that young people who self-identify as part of underrepresented communities can have a path to leadership in local government? We'll start to hear first from Michael this time. Please.
Yeah, Laura, I think it starts at the, if we're talking about young people, it starts at the lowest level of having, engagement with our students in our elementary schools and our middle schools and our high schools and at our college level. And what I would like to see is have more outreach from city council members themselves going into the schools and having conversations in an assembly type form or in front of a classroom, and letting these students recognize and understand what their experiences are representing the city in a council member position, and encouraging these students to get involved. And there are a number of ways that students can do that. We've got a number of volunteer opportunities through open space, through Parks and Rec, through the city itself, to help young students, young people get involved. And I think once you open that door for these individuals, it leads itself down to a path of these individuals wanting to be more engaged, wanting to be more involved, and feeling like they are welcomed in their city government, and that they can make a difference. So that's how I would respond to that question.
Thank you for your answer. Now we'll give the space to Mark to hear you.
I would do a couple of different things. First, we need better working conditions on council. And by that, I mean, first, it's very difficult to make good decisions when you're meeting at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. It's also extremely difficult to be a student or to hold a job and serve those ridiculous hours. So we need to address that. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to provide something closer to a living wage so people can make the decision that they want to be on council, they can afford to be on council, and they can strive to be on council. I also think that we need to have better outreach and get young people interested in serving on boards and commissions because that's the stepping stone to moving up and actually being elected to the council. And whether it's parks, planning board, whatever, we need to find opportunities to put younger people and in that position so that they can gain the experience. It's very difficult to just jump up and run for council without having had any of those experiences. I did that, and I really don't recommend it for too many other people. It is better to have a better grounding and background, and we need to be able to reach out to young people and say, here's an opportunity to serve and to get some experience that will permit you in a couple of years to run for council. And when you do run for council, we can give you enough income so that you don't have to be burning the candle at both ends on a daily basis. So those are the things I would look to do.
Thank you for that answer, Mark. Now we'll pass the microphone to Nicole to hear your answer.
Thank you so much for this question. I love this question. It makes me so happy. This is one of my favorite things to do in my role at the university. And I've been doing this for many years now. And what I have found is necessary in order to get people from underrepresented communities into leadership positions, into positions where they're gaining professional skills and knowledge is to pay them. And Shakita Yarbrough, who's running for Longmont City Council and who I sincerely hope wins up there, she has this beautiful idea about bringing in paid interns to partner with people on city council and basically do some of the learning work with us and really partner with council people in order to give them the skills and experience and knowledge. I will say just in terms of my own missteps, when I first started doing this work, I think that there is a lot of education work that needs to happen for people in those positions before they're sort of in a space where they're ready to mentor students from groups that they are not a part of without doing harm. But I think that is absolutely work that can be done. But I would love to see us have those kinds of paid internships here in Boulder as well as in Longmont.
Thank you for sharing your answer. Now we'll give the floor to Lauren to hear your answer.
So one of the things that I think are, we have a program right now called Growing Up Boulder, which does get students, particularly at quite young ages, involved with imagining what the future of our city should look like and getting them involved with a variety of local issues. I think that's a really amazing, great program. And it always, the work that they produce is typically really inspired. I love it. So I think, continuing programs like that and then sort of working up through age categories. Right now, I think we have kind of a missing step. I think that, the internship program that Nicole mentioned would be fantastic. But as someone who was appointed fairly young to the Design Advisory Board, I think, and as someone who tries to recruit people to apply to the Design Advisory Board, there are some major hurdles for young people to serve on our boards and commissions. The typical appointment is 5 years, and students and people who are renters have a hard time knowing if they can make that 5-year commitment. That it's also unpaid. Design Advisory Board is fairly low in terms of the number of hours it requires, but some other boards and commissions are quite high. And so I think, not only looking at pay for council, but also potentially pay for some of these other positions to make sure that they truly are accessible to everyone, and then doing the work of actively recruiting for them.
Gracias a todos por sus
Thank you to all for your answers. Now we'll go to the next question. It's a simple question. Tell us, in what way is your work and your proposals, are they actively anti-racist? And we'll start to listen to the answer first from, this time from Lauren. I know that you just finished. You will put the question in the chat. Would you like me to repeat the question?
That's okay, thank you. So as an architect, most of what I'm thinking about in my professional life and a lot of my volunteer work is around buildings. So for me, a large part of my platform is our affordable housing crisis and our climate crisis. And so for me, you know, looking at part of why those issues are really important to me has to do with who they affect. I think that we need to do everything we can to help people who work in Boulder live in Boulder so that they aren't being forced to divide their lives. And I think that that is tends to fall disproportionately on people of color in our community. I also think that you know, when we look at some of the things around climate change, for instance, street tree planting and things like that, we see that those that tends to happen in wealthy neighborhoods. So making sure that we are allowing and sort of bringing the tools necessary to make everyone part of the solutions to these major issues in our community and not leaving anyone behind is really fundamental to what I'm trying to promote in running for council. And I just, for me, all these issues are really inextricably linked.
Gracias por esa respuesta.
Thank you for that answer. Now we'll hear Michael's answer, please.
Thank you, Laura. So one of the assignments that I had when I was in the Air Force was to sit as a judge, as a bench officer in a case. And I remember sitting on that seat and knowing that I had to judge this person's guilt or innocence, and recognizing the need for me to really consciously put aside any biases that I had before judging this case, because I knew pretty certainly that this individual was guilty of the crime that he was charged with. So I think that had an everlasting impact on me going forward in my life, because I have found that since then, in my role as a lawyer and as a mediator, that I really try to look at things objectively and make sure that I'm pushing aside my own personal biases. And what I would envision is that if I am elected to council, that, I mean, I can talk like, oh, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to do, but I'm not going to fool anyone by saying, oh yes, well, I am the one who can, you know, achieve all of these goals to make sure that social justice and racial equity is where we are tomorrow. It's a process. It's looking inside yourself. It's doing the best that you can with the tools that you have available. And for me, that would be, again, having people at my side through community engagement, through these underrepresented communities, to help guide me in the decisions, the policy decisions that I would be making. I would also be using the Boulder's Racial Equity Plan to help guide me in my thought process in coming up to decisions or policy decisions that I would be making on behalf of the city. So I think, you know, sort of a combination of all of that.
Gracias por su respuesta.
Thank you for your answer. Now we'll hear Nicole. We'll give you the mic.
Thank you. This is work that I am actively doing every single day. Being a white person in a white supremacist society, where I am getting constant messages that everyone who does not look like me is somehow less than me. This is work that needs to be done every day to counteract that. And what I have found to be the most effective in my work and in everything I do is to make sure that I am bringing people in as partners. It is very easy to just kind of go by and have the people who are always there that you're used to being around. But how are you actively looking for the people who have different perspectives than you and bringing them in as people who you are respecting their opinions and you are trusting that the experience they are bringing is the right one. One of the first things when I started doing more anti-racist work that I really needed to work on in myself was getting to a place where I did have that trust, where I realized I am not going, as a white person, I am not going to be the person that has the ideas or solutions on how to address racism. And I am also the person who is best equipped to kind of take on some of the emotional burden of trying to carve out anti-racist spaces. So for me, it really comes down to having partners, having people that I've built relationships with who will tell me when I'm getting things right, tell me when I'm getting things wrong, and tell me what work I need to be doing to create these anti-racist spaces.
Thank you for your answer. Now we'll listen to Mark to answer the same question.
I look to see that every action that we take on council is fair and equitable and does not create a disproportionate burden for underrepresented communities, for people of color. I have a great emphasis, place a great emphasis on creating affordable housing because I think that is key to creating a more diverse community. I support aggressive steps to combat the climate crisis because the impacts of the climate crisis are always going to fall upon lower income communities in a way that is disproportionate to other communities. I am a staunch advocate of our manufactured home communities and the people who live there because of their special vulnerabilities. And that has been something that I have focused on since I've been on council. So it's an ongoing process. As a council, I think we try to do the best that we can. We're all sensitive to this and we're all conscious of it on a daily basis.
Thank you for sharing your answers, all of you. Now we'll go to the next question. The communities of color and also LGBTQ communities are often living through violence from the police. For example, harassment, the gender with which they identify is not respected, homicides, attacks, a disproportional percentage in comparison to the white community or the heterosexual and the cisgender community. What is your vision to stop this violence against people of color and the LGBTQ community in our community? We'll first start to hear the answer of Nicole, please.
Thank you. This is such an important question. And, the reason is because public safety is kind of coming up a lot in this election and in some of these forums. And I think what feels like it's often overlooked is that public safety includes protecting people within our LGBTQ community, protecting our BIPOC community from the systems that have typically oppressed them and that have typically caused them harm. For me, thinking about ending some of this violence really comes down to minimizing interactions with law enforcement as well as having very kind of severe and swift consequences for law enforcement officers who are engaging in violence of any kind. And it could be verbal violence or anything like that. It doesn't have to just be physical violence. So those are the two things that that I think about. I really would like to, especially in some of this reimagining policing discussions that we're having right now, see more weight being given to the Black community, to our Native communities, to our Latino community as well, and just some of the communities that have typically been overrepresented in terms of interactions with policing. I think this is particularly true in our community of people who are experiencing homelessness. The interactions that they are having there for people who are BIPOC or Latino are really, they are disproportionate relative to what they would be. Some of the work that we're doing in the NAACP as well is really working on trying to minimize these interactions between law enforcement and students of color in our schools as well. I think diverting some of the responses to people who are not law enforcement can help just minimize these interactions and minimize the chances for something bad happening.
Gracias por su respuesta, Nicole. Ahora queremos escuchar.
Thank you for your answer, Nicole. Now we're going to listen to the answer by Michael, please.
Thank you, Laura. So I think that the key to this issue is, Chief Harold is implementing the Reimagining the Police program, where she is taking community input from members of underrepresented communities and sitting at the table with them, having robust discussions about what the police can be doing better to address these types of issues. I know that Chief Harold and DA Michael Doherty are working collaboratively to address this issue. I do believe that they are doing a good job in that respect, and that we are in the right trajectory. We can always be doing more. You can always be improving upon your police department. In my opinion, there's no excuse for unwarranted police violence, harassment. All of that should be something at the wayside, but unfortunately it's not. So we just need to continue to try to do the best that we can and move forward with reimagining our police or police reform to make sure that our police officers are getting the training, the sensitivity training that they need, so that they know and they are aware of how their conduct and their actions are being perceived by somebody else in one of these underrepresented communities.
Gracias por su respuesta. Ahora quisiéramos.
Thank you for your answer. Now we would like to listen to Mark with his answer.
We are in the process of sort of reimagining policing. I think that's a process that has barely begun, but it will continue. I do have a good deal of confidence in Police Chief Maris Harold, who is extremely reform-minded, and I believe she will, over time, change the composition of our police force so that those who engage in those kinds of abusive behaviors will no longer be part of the police department. She emphasizes increased training for her officers, and I would be very supportive of that. And as I said, she will weed out those who cannot adapt to a more modern, more progressive culture of policing. So I simply think that we need to give her some opportunity to work, to see how her reforms are proceeding, and to see whether it's having an impact on interactions with our underrepresented or BIPOC or LGBTQ communities. And if it is not having the desired impact, then we will have to take further steps to make sure that we get to the right place.
Gracias por su respuesta, Mark. Ahora.
Thank you for that answer, Mark. Now we want to listen to Lauren. We'll give the floor to Lauren.
So I think that the reimagining policing is a really important step for our community to take. And I look forward to seeing the reforms that come out of that. One of the things that I am a strong proponent of is having crisis intervention separate from policing. I really strongly think that it's important to have the right professionals showing up in the right situations. So for me, having teams that are not driving police cars, that aren't just ride-alongs for police units, to show up to calls for mental health and addiction and issues of addiction, as well as being sort of the first response team for calls around the unhoused community. I also would like to see us look at the Police Oversight Board. I know that it's new, and as they're sort of getting up to speed and working through some things, I really think that we need to check in with the communities, particularly portions of, underrepresented portions of our community, to make sure that this board is accomplishing what we would like it to accomplish.
Gracias a todos por su respuesta. Ahora
Thank you
pasamos-
everyone for your answers. And now we're going on the last question, which goes like this. What areas of equity do you think you have to learn more about? How would you go about doing that? We would like to listen first the answer by Michael to this question.
I think I need to learn more about all areas of equity. I certainly don't pretend that I am an expert on this at all. And I certainly don't pretend that I have the answer to these problems. It's interesting, a while back, I had reached out to a gentleman by the name of Lee Seamus, who runs Intercambio, because I was interested in going into the Hispanic community to try to establish relations. And Lee had told me that that probably wasn't a good idea, because I probably wouldn't be well received without having some type of liaison to facilitate any type of exchange. And so he really impressed upon me the importance of, again, I'll refer back to this, the Boulder Connectors program that I mentioned earlier a few times. I can certainly learn more from people who are willing to engage with me if I can establish a relationship with them, so I can truly understand what are their needs, what are their challenges, what are their vulnerabilities, what is it that they need from the city to make their lives easier for them. And I envision that happening through having some type of liaison, again, whether it's through the Boulder Connectors program or some other type of engagement with these underrepresented communities. But to me, it's me going into these communities with someone who can help me facilitate that type of communication.
Gracias por su respuesta. Ahora quisiéramos
Thank you for your answer. Now we would like to listen. Lauren, please, could you share your answer?
Yes. So I think that one of these issues of equity, are really important to me. But having grown up in a predominantly white community with sort of racist messaging being all around us all of the time, I think that there's still so much more work that I can do on myself to understand my own biases and work to address those and become the best advocate I can for my community. I think that a lot of this is work that I need to do on my own, but also in terms of my own understanding, but also to reach out to the community around me and make sure that I'm listening to any issues that they bring up, so that, so that I can be the best advocate I can be.
Thank you for that answer. Now we would like to listen to Nicole, please.
Thank you. I'm going to echo Michael and say all, everything, because even the groups that I'm a part of, I only understand my experience. I don't understand other people's experiences who have different combinations of things than I do, or who are different people living their different lives. So for me, this really comes down to creating personal relationships with people from groups that I am not naturally a part of. This is how I have been able to do the most learning, especially when they are wonderful people who will call me out when I do things that are not in line with my stated values. So, just strengthening those personal relationships, I think, is one way, and continuing to expand the people in my world, so that I have those views and those understandings. Where there are people that just communities that I am not connected to, the way that I do this is by following media people, so artists, reporters, people who are political commentators, anybody who can give me a different perspective than what I have, so that I can see the things that I would normally see through my eyes, a little bit through their eyes as well, to get those perspectives. So for me, it's really about building relationships and making sure that I am exposing myself to a diverse group of people who are giving me information and feeding my brain.
Thanks for your answer. And now we would like to listen to Mark.
Yeah,
You have the mic and the time.
I'm going to echo what everyone else has said. It's all areas. This is a lifelong process of education, and it never ends. It's very difficult to put yourself into the shoes of another individual and understand their life experiences fully, not just in a surface way, but viscerally and deeply. And I coming out of New York, having lived there for 40 years, a place with vibrant LGBTQ, Latino and Black communities, I would say that helps a little, but it's not sufficient. It's only a snapshot, and this is an educational process that's got to continue throughout your whole life. And the only way to do that is to listen and be responsive and speak to others and try to understand what is motivating them and what concerns them and how you might be able to help them. There's nothing formulaic about it. There's not a simple course you can take that will properly prepare you. You simply have to be receptive to all points of view and be able to speak and converse and sometimes argue with those points of view. But if you want to understand people, you must engage with them.
Gracias a todos por sus respuestas.
Thank you all for your answers to each of our questions today. Now, we would like to give you 1 minute, if you could take 1 minute, so each candidate will close with their final arguments. Once again, we thank you for participating, and we would like to start with the final argument by Lauren. Please.
I just want to start off by thanking you so much for having us tonight. I think that this was a really unique opportunity, and I wish that we had more forums like this. I really have appreciated your questions and the format that we have here tonight. My main platform is around affordable and attainable housing and our climate crisis. And while I didn't dive super deeply into those issues, I hope that you will have heard things that you like and be willing to check out my website, laurenforboulder.com. I look forward to hearing more from everyone about how we can make Boulder the most inclusive place it can be.
Gracias, Lauren, por compartir tus últimos argumentos.
Thank you, Lauren, for sharing your last statements, final statements. And now we would like to listen to Mark for 1 minute.
Thank you. This was a challenging and very interesting forum. The questions were terrific. Again, I have served on council for 2 years and I'm running for re-election. I'm very proud of the fact that on a council with very, very, very different points of view, I have been endorsed by each and every member of the council. I think that's because I'm capable of working across lines, cooperating with people, and I think I am respected for the amount of work I put in and the diligence with which I carry out my office. If I am re-elected, I will do no less, and I will try to serve this community to the best of my abilities, and I hope you will support me in doing that. Thank you.
Gracias por compartir esos últimos pensamientos. Ahora nos pasamos.
Thank you for sharing those last thoughts. Now we would listen to Nicole's. You have the mic, Nicole.
I just want to echo the thank you for being here tonight and taking taking a couple of precious hours to listen to us and ask us these wonderfully challenging questions. I really appreciate all of you.
Helado.
Thank you. What I would like to say is, you know, if I am elected to council, and even in the last few weeks of the campaign, I would really love to hear from you if I am getting things wrong, if I am saying things that are making you feel excluded and unwelcome, if you are hearing me say things that could be done better or need a different perspective. I will put my email into the chat, and I really would love it if you would reach out to me and let me know. I think this is one of the things that I can bring to City Council is that, you know, even though I am a white homeowner here in Boulder, I am somebody who can listen and can do so without getting defensive, without getting upset, without being fragile. I'm not saying it won't hurt me to hear that I'm not living my values, but I will not let you see that. And so I really hope that you will feel that you can come to me, even in these last weeks of campaigning, certainly if I get onto council, and please let me know where I can do better, because I am trying to be of service to everyone in our community and create a space where we all feel welcome. Thank you.
Gracias por esas últimas palabras. Ahora
Thank you for those last words. Now we will give the mic to Michael for his last comments.
Laura, again, thank you to you and everyone who's participated in this. This has been probably one of the better forums that we've had an opportunity to participate in. I feel like the questions they're a mix of policy and heart. And so I feel like a lot of us are speaking from our heart and from our gut, as opposed to just trying to give the typical political rhetoric. So this has been a really great experience for me. You know, I hope that throughout this forum, it's, you know, you can recognize that in me that I have the leadership ability, the skill set that's necessary to be an effective voice, sitting in that chair in City Council. As a mediator, you know, I think I have pretty excellent listening skills. And my hope is to, you know, listen to all of you in the community and do the best that I can do to represent you to the best of my ability. You know, with respect to diversity and equity and inclusion, I think that, you know, collectively, we all have a duty to recognize that there's a lot of unfinished and essential work that needs to be done to make equality and inclusion an everyday reality for all of us. And we can be doing better with respect to making Boulder a more welcoming, inclusive, and equitable community. And I hope that you'll support me in this endeavor and vote for me on November 2nd. And again, I appreciate you all being here tonight. Thank you very much.
Gracias a todos los candidatos que vinieron.
Thank you all the candidates that came today. Thank you for have expressed yourselves so openly to our community. Now we want to invite you to the closing. We want to thank the community organizations that have formally supported this initiative, those who sent us their questions, and those who helped us promote this forum. Without you, this would not have been possible. Also, thanks, special thanks to the interpreters, Rey, Maria de Jesus, Elena, and Marina for their important work. And once again, to the candidates that were present here today to listen to their community tonight. Finally, I would like to let you know that your facilitator today come from the Bridging Communications Company. I am at your service for any kind of service, this kind of service in the future that could benefit from my support. I will leave my links related to my company in the chat box so that you can review my credentials, my services, and my contact. It was also an honor to have been invited by the organizing committee of Perspectiva and to be part of this work that is a collective work. Thank you to the participants that are listening. And with this, we leave you with a final closing. Have a beautiful night.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much.